and welcome to the podcast Being Human, Hidden Depths by Collaboration Global. My name is Jill Tiny and I'm delighted to welcome our guest for today, Mr. Benn Abdy Collins. Welcome, Ben. How are you?
Hi, Jill. I'm good, thank you. How are you today?
You know what? The sun's shining. We've just had a beautiful Easter, and although we've all been ensconced indoors with a little staycation, actually, it's, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. There's lots happening. I get to speak to lovely people like you today, find out a little bit more about you. I will pose the question that I normally pose to people first and foremost is, obviously you've been attracted to Collaboration Global as a community. What is it about collaboration that kind of makes you go, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's have a little bit more of that. What drew you to our little community?
Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to answer that question. I get it. It makes sense. One of the greatest things human beings can do is to cooperate with each other in a community. That's what Collaboration Global is all about. And it's built on virtues and values and qualities. So that's my interest. Turn up, connect, bond, be with people, share the love, but do it in a very grounded, practical and sensible way of making a difference. That's why I joined the community.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we are getting to know you for, because it's been just over a year now since you joined our merry band, is that you have love at the heart of everything that you do. And it's, I don't know if it's just me, but I think it's quite unusual to find someone that really wears their heart on their sleeve quite so openly as you do. You're kind of, this is your being, this is who you want to be known for, is this love person that just encapsulates how can I help you, what can I do? Kind of let me be those arms that come around you to comfort you in your hour of need. Has that kind of always been with you, do you think? Have you, even from a child, was that something, or is it something that you've kind of grown into as you've got older?
I don't quite know how to answer that.
I feel like you've always been like this.
The thing for me is I've probably grown into it. I guess it's always been there, but I didn't know, or I didn't realise, or I didn't understand. Basically, I'm very serious as a person, and I was always a kind of a fluffy airhead in many ways. And a few years ago, I met someone who was very, very down to earth, and he became a mentor of mine. And bit by bit, I became very much more in the world. But I do have a sense of humour. Yes, I've actually said that in public. I hereby admit to having a sense of humour. And to me, love has got a lot to do with having a giggle, having a laugh at what's going on, and being caring and building engaging relationships is something I can do very quickly. Because I would describe myself as a professional listener. I can hear the words people say to me, but not just the words. I can hear sometimes the emotion or the turmoil or the torment or the gaps between the lines. And with that, it means that I can provide kindness even though I can see someone's traumatized. Because sometimes it is that thing of love's the answer, what's the question?
Yeah.
And what I think we need to do as human beings is to be a lot more loving and caring and supportive with each other. So I'm very touched by the expression that you used to describe me about being like a pair of invisible arms, I think it was that you said. Because it is reaching out and just going, there, I know. And I don't ever want to be patronizing doing it. I depend on it for my work, but I also depend on it for building my friendly communities around me, whichever organization I'm in at the time. Because I think, and I feel, and I believe that we all deserve to be cared for, loved and respected and regarded. And I think it's powerful. And if we did that just a fraction more, our worlds and the world that we live in would be dramatically different.
Absolutely. Do you see our world exactly what you just said? Really, it's being impacted at the moment in this age of Corona. How have you experienced a difference from what you say even 6 months ago, a bit of experience?
I'm not the same as I was 6 months ago, so I can't tell you. Um, I have been watching things in a particular way this year. I don't know what happened to me in January. It was one of those moments in life when a light switch seems to have been flicked. Can't tell you what, can't tell you how, can't tell you where, can't tell you when, but I can tell you it happened. It happened probably why? Because I was prepared to consider things differently and to see things differently. And my whole way of working has changed. More, it feels more effective than it used to. And at the same time, I'm also watching the world around me shift. So yeah, I was getting busy in February, and then we get into March, and then there's this sort of mention of there might be something going on in the world that seems to be causing people to be poorly. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, there is really something going on, and we really need to do something about it. And then it's all getting very dramatic, and then we're in lockdown. And then our Prime Minister gets sick.
Yeah, scary.
So it has been incredibly uncertain times. The word unprecedented has suddenly become one of the biggest buzzwords there is, and it even turned up in one of my earliest posts about it, because I post every working day on LinkedIn. And I noticed that there was a huge amount of shock. I mean, I live in the capital, and I'm near a tube station, so so I'm between two schools, and a tube station. So if it isn't kids going backwards and forwards, it's commuters going backwards and forwards. And it went from loads of stuff happening to nothing. And at the same time, there was a huge wave of people turning up on social media, on Zoom. Zoom, I was told, went from 5 million subscribers to 200 million subscribers overnight. That was one of the reasons why there were so many security issues early on. And we suddenly went very virtual, and everyone was on a Zoom call. Literally, people went rectangularized overnight, and there were meetings and people doing this, and people coming up with solutions. What I did notice amongst the people that I love, care for, and know fairly well, was we began to collaborate and become stronger communities. A great deal more care and support for each other, and a great deal more understanding. And how are you today? What's going on? Because even those of us in the caring profession, some of us were still going stir crazy. Some of us were feeling very disrupted. Some of us were comfort eating. That might be days one. That might be days 1 and 2, weeks 1 and 2, and 3, and we are now in 4. And yeah, I've noticed I probably weigh a little bit more than I did, and I suspect it's just frustration, because my business just disappeared overnight, because I do face to face. Whichever version of work I'm doing, it's always face to face. So I've witnessed the world completely turn upside down. The social structure, the societal structure, the business structure, the way we are in the world as a community, as a culture, as a country, it's all suddenly no more quite the same. So there is the World War II, let's get on with it. There are people putting together. I mean, I live with someone who's Polish, and the Poles have lived under the Nazis and the communists. So for 60 years, they've been under someone else's stuff, and they have really pulled together as a community. They are the people that are still going to work and being key workers, or keeping things ticking over, because they are out driving vehicles, they deliver stuff, they look after their own community. So they're a good example of how the English or the British have been through crises before. And I'm seeing that happen now. A return to some of this. We get through this because we get through this because we have an attitude that we will deal with it.
Yes, yeah, and I think a lot of people that I've experienced have been going through a roller coaster of emotions, and even the ones that you look to for guidance have also been going through a roller coaster of emotions. And I think you're allowed to, because of social media, you're allowed to say, I'm having a bad day. This isn't working for me, or I can't, I'm not feeling great. But the British spirit, or I don't think it's British spirit, I think it's humankind spirit of we will fight this, we will get through this, we will come out the other end, is very, very strong. And I often think on my down times when, you know, you're feeling it's not fair, I can't go out, I want to go to the seaside. That's my thing. If I get sad or upset, I want to go to the ocean, and I can't go to the ocean. But, you know, and you can count your blessings, and you go, I know I've got a nice house to sit in. I know I've got an outside space, and I know I can go, you know, all this stuff, and you know it's your blessings. But at the same time, you're still feeling frightened, scared of the unknown. You feel like you're on quicksand. You don't feel like you've got, what happened? Where are my foundations gone? All I can think of is my mum, who died, God bless her, in 2013 on Boxing Day. Good timing. She always said it was going to be a bad year. She wasn't wrong. But if I said to her what was happening now, her response would be, well, at least they're not dropping bombs on your head, are they? And I know exactly that's what she would have said, because we are pitting ourselves against an unknown enemy. We're not pitting ourselves against each other. It's not the Brits against the Germans or the Russians against the Poles or whoever. It's not nation against nation. We have all come together. And that, for me, is the epitome of this. You know, we are showing demonstrably how collaboration can work by doing, you know, together. And we might not be agreeing with the solution, but it's something that we're all giving it a go. And over time, we'll work out if this is a good thing to be doing, staying at home, or whether we should just be getting on with it and getting out there. And there are two schools of thought. One thing that crossed my mind, though, bearing in mind what you've just been saying about love and spreading love, what do you think about all these conspiracy theories that are doing the rounds on social media that are kind of inciting, you know, upset, inciting hate, inciting people to be depressed? Because if they catch sight of any of these and read through them, you think the world had gone to hell in a handcart. How do you cope with that kind of intrusion into your life in social media?
I don't read them. Sorry, is that the wrong answer?
No, I love that. I mean, that's my response. Have you seen this? Have you seen it? Oh, I don't read it. Just don't read it.
I also don't follow the stats in the news. I mean, I very, very occasionally listen to the news. So today, I don't know. I think I heard the news at some point today, and it was coronavirus. Will Young and what's his name have re-released the single. End of news.
Totally good. I didn't know that. Yeah.
It's like, okay, at least there's something that wasn't coronavirus related. But I think we create our own crosses to bear. I do apologise for that particular style of statement, but I believe it's very true. There is a lot to be associated between pandemonium and pandemic. If you look at the Greek god Pan, regardless if you believe in gods, let's just use language here. But Pan was always associated with chaos. And when we get chaos in our emotions and we get chaos in our world, there is a strong correlation. And the more we buy into being part of the emotional wave of fear, funnily enough, we're much more likely to be sick. Now, I'm not saying we won't get sick because we're not fearful. I'm not that foolish. However, if we feel particularly vulnerable, we are much more likely to attract the chaos into our world. That bit, there's plenty of evidence. It's all very anecdotal. I mean, I'm sure someone's done some research and there is a paper or two on it, but most of life is very anecdotal. Most of human experience is very anecdotal. But it is this thing of, we will make up stories. Everything's about stories. Yeah. And there is a story about we will manage the world by doing things this way. But then also, what about? Some of it might be true. Some of it might not be true. I don't think instigating fear, which is what you were pointing to, is helpful. We have enough stuff on our plate with just everyday human attitude and behavior before we start getting into it's like this and it's like that. And yes, it's possible to pull some of that apart, look at it slightly more logically, and actually be able to refute it slightly logically. But then there is that thing of like it was a very communist type attitude that religion was the opium of the people. However, the beliefs of communism were just as much of an opium attitude, because it was the war was for the minds of people. Do you believe in the equality of brotherhood, even though some people are more equal than others? Do you believe in the equality of religion, in which everyone is equal except for those who are more equal than others? Do you believe in the brotherhood of spirituality, of which everyone is equal except for those who are more equal than others? Do you believe in capitalism, where everyone has the right to be able to fight tooth and nail? It's all about belief systems and who's got the right to be in charge of what's happening so that people follow a particular route. There is a wisdom that states that if everyone's heading in a particular direction, the sane people head in the opposite direction, because that might well be a wiser place to go. I don't know. It's all thinking, and it's
Yeah.
all perspectives. And I believe personally it might be true, but it also might equally be complete tosh. Time will tell.
This is the thing, nobody actually knows.
Nope.
So you can sound as emphatic as you like, but actually, if all you're doing is spreading fear, that's not really fair to all the millions of people that are home alone and don't know, but are vulnerable to this kind of propaganda. Whether it's propaganda by the state or propaganda by the conspiracy theorists, we need to make sure that it's a positive outlook. It's a let's come together outlook. It's a way of strengthening ourselves because we're coming together and knowing what you know from your experience of life, not from what you've heard from somebody else. A friend of mine has been posting different Facebook messages and sending them to me as if I can check them for him to go, what do you think? And I'm like, stop sending them to me. They don't do you any good. They don't do me any good. It's just scare tactics. And I don't want to be scared. Thank you very much. I think it's in a totally different line, but coming back to how you help people feel better is it's ironic that if you're self-employed, or you're an actor, for example, you very rarely get ill because as an actor, Dr. Footlights will make you better. In other words, you can struggle through most illnesses, common cold, the odd virus. When you know you've got to go on stage, you get there and you get on stage and you're fine, you can be ill afterwards. Same as if you are running your own business. If you haven't got time to be ill, quite often you either don't get ill or you push it off. But if you've got the luxury of having sick leave, paid sick leave, like, oh, I don't think I feel very well. Oh, I'll have a day off today. And quite often you go, oh yeah, I have 3 or 4 colds, or I get a couple of viruses every winter. It's like, well, I haven't had a virus for many, many years. I don't have time. Now, that doesn't belittle the people that have been genuinely ill. And obviously coronavirus, you ain't going to shake that off in a blink of an eye. But it is sometimes about mental attitude, because if you have a poor mental attitude about yourself, you're not going to treat your body as a temple. You're not going to eat healthy food. You're not going to drink healthily. You're not going to exercise properly. You're not going to give your mind a stretch and a meditate and a time off and time out. You're going to be push through. And you can't make yourself better. You have to build your immune system up from in the first place in order to carry on and keep going. So one of the things that I was fascinated about, I think when the first 2 or 3 meetings that we had, I think I had a headache or something, and you gave me one of your tinctures to help out. Now, again, some people go, oh, that's all in the mind, that's why Jill felt better. I don't really care if it was all in the mind, to be honest with you. It worked. So whether it was some magic potion that you gave me, or whether it was truly scientifically driven herbal remedy, or whether it was just me kidding myself, it's like the placebo effect. If the placebo works, then take the bloody placebo. It's what you have faith in and what you adhere to. So tell me more about how you have got faith in your herbal products to help people feel better about themselves. And where did that start from? Is that that donkey's years ago, or is that just relatively recently?
Wow. It's quite some question. Okay.
I have a comment, a quick question at the end.
Yeah. It's like, oh, right. Okay. So when I was a kid, I'm a naval child, and when I was 4, my dad was posted to Nigeria. We're coming towards the end of the Commonwealth, and they needed officers out in Lagos, capital of Nigeria, which meant that I got given all the vaccines. I was a 4-year-old being filled up with cholera and typhoid, and this is on top of the German measles and MMR, mumps, measles, and rubella. So yeah, I just basically filled up and then dropped on a plane, off we go, and I got really ill, and I had to be flown back to my tonsils and adenoids taken out. I was the same colour as your T-shirt. I was white, literally, with little dark rings under my eyes. I was a very, very poorly child, and when I got into being a teenager, I started understanding that natural remedies worked better for me. And sometime in my early 20s, no, late teens, just turning 20, I discovered herbal medicines work really well for me, because I'm massively allergic to insect bites. Give me a horsefly bite and I will swell up like a flipping walrus. Huge. And the one thing that worked was herbal medicine. And I do the same with mosquitoes, but not quite so dramatically. And I was looking for something else to do, because I had a different understanding. I've explored spirituality and as well as well-being, as well as herbal medicine, all at the same time. And I discovered that there is a strong bond between them. And yes, you can use herbal medicine very scientifically, which is my training. I spent 4 years in college learning how to do that. But at the same time, human beings are allegedly irrational, allegedly illogical, allegedly so many more things in the physical form. We are really just a community of thoughts and cells that kind of occupy the same space. And how we think and how we feel is an interesting combination. Now, what's also interesting is that herbal medicines don't just work on the physical form, they don't just target. So you might take a medicine from a doctor, that medicine is designed to do a particular job. So you have an illness, it's designed to kill bugs. If it's an infection, you might have a hormonal imbalance, it's designed to rebalance the hormonal system. You might have high blood pressure, but you've got things that target different parts of either the heart and or the circulation. Now, in herbal medicine, the herbs that we use, are very few of them are very specific in their targeting. There are a couple that do very specific jobs in very specific groups of cells. The rest have a general way of doing things. So instead of killing off an infection, it might boost the immune system. But quite a lot of the herbs that balance the immune system also work on what the digestion is doing, or they help with a sense of well-being to get through. They help to strengthen the ability of resilience. And some herbs work on 5 or 6 different systems within the body at the same time to make a difference. So herbal medicine has the ability to help an individual to be well and have a sense of well-being alongside dealing with the treatment. And that includes helping a person to think more clearly or deal with things more effectively. It's a very, very interesting profession, but it also depends a lot on tailoring things appropriately to an individual. And when it's provided with love and with care, and a person gets better, is it important that it was the herbs? Is it important that someone believed it was possible to have a different state of well-being? Is it important to have a good relationship between 2 individuals in which there's caring, kind, compassion, and understanding? Because a human being is one incredible mixture of potential and wonder and beauty, regardless of what the physical form is, and possibility and potential. And when someone begins to believe that's possible, amazing things happen. So sometimes, as a practitioner, I do the same job as anyone who's in what's called a healing profession. I'm encouraging someone to believe that they can be better. My modality is almost irrelevant. If that person begins to believe, then they shift and change for their own self and for their own sake. So a wonderful priest might help someone to feel well, whereas a very eloquent and well-trained, inverted commas, doctor has no effect on them at all. Because with the first person, hope kicks in. The second person, they might be put off by arrogance. They might believe that they're incompetent or irrelevant. So there's a huge amount of how can we engage with each other and then offer and implement therapeutic practices. Because therapeutic practices are easy and anyone can treat physical. But can everyone encourage someone else to believe and have hope that there is a possible different experience? I might not be answering your question, but
no, I love it because it goes back to what you said at the beginning about being a professional listener. And it makes perfect sense that doctors who are restricted to 10 minutes per patient don't have the luxury of being able to sit there and listen to what's really going on. They can treat symptoms, but they don't actually hear the underlying problem because they're not in a position to help those people by listening to what their problem is. So when they say complementary medicine, it really is about whatever you find that you need to take, whatever your illness, there will be something that can add in. But I think I read a book once by a guy called Dr. Fabio Mancini. I remembered it. And he's called The Power of Self-Healing. And basically he's saying that it's the faith that you have in the individual that will help you to heal. And whether your faith is with a doctor, whether your faith is with a witch doctor, whether your faith is with the herbalist or whoever, it's that faith that helps you to get better. And I think what you are saying is, which is what you're saying earlier, is you're a professional listener. So as a herbalist, that is your gift to them. You're gifting them your time to be able to listen to what is truly ailing them. And that sometimes the symptoms do not belie what the cause is. And you're able to spend time to uncover the cause and then help them to, once they understand, it's like, oh, right. It's almost like they're banging their head on a wall and then wondering why they've got this lump on their head. You know, it's like, well, I've got this lump. I don't know what. Well, stop banging your head against it. Oh, okay, then I didn't. And you're allowing them to see that little glimmer of, oh, it could be that then. It's like when people have digestive problems. I would imagine the herbs are an amazing way of helping it. But digestive problems start up here, don't they? Before they go.
They are part of it. They are part of it. It's just human beings are complex. We do have this horrible habit of trying to make everything simple.
One size
and
fits
yes,
all.
yeah. Sometimes things are simple, and sometimes a simple remedy is all that's required. But sometimes it's just, I believe it's a fundamental human need to be heard. Not everyone believes that. Some people would rather just keep everything in. I just think having the possibility to be heard allows people to relax, even if they don't choose to be able to speak. But it's the whole thing about being accepted. It's the whole thing about being cared for. It's the whole thing of enabling or allowing that respect to be present. Because most of us have got very complicated stories. And if not us, the people that have been our caregivers or the sorts of relationships we've had with other individuals have also been incredibly powerful, and they have influenced our lives. So there's a story about, I met a girl, she was born in the UK, a Polish father. Her father was petrified of Germans. This girl, who'd never been to Germany, never met Germans, was petrified of Germans, and if she heard Germans being spoken, she was scared stupid. Now, she'd learned her father's behaviour because he grew up in the Second World War when the Germans were occupying Poland.
You probably needed to be scared. It was a good
Yeah,
safety.
it was. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Germans around. I'll get out of the way. You never know what they're going to do next.
Mm.
But her daughter had learnt that. And modern Germans are not the same as the Germans of the Second World War. And not all Germans were part of the machinery, but they were part of the country. And it's association. If we can realize that our associations aren't always the most helpful, because we've had that opportunity to air the space and go, oh, I can see that differently now. It's almost like the difference of I'm in love, I'm not in love. I see something, I don't see it. It's that principle. I mean, whoever's ever driven a car in the early hours of the morning, daylight is slowly coming up, and there's mist, and you can see the trees above the mist, and you can see the body of cattle and no legs, or you can see legs and no body of cattle. And it's just things come and go because the mist shifts. And I think a lot of life is like that. Sometimes we're hidden in the fog, sometimes we're hidden in the dark, sometimes we're in the dark and the fog, and it's stormy too. And other times it's a clear, beautiful day. There's no haze. You can see for miles and miles and miles. And I think we dodge in and out of those things, but we can't see them because we're in the middle of it all. And spending time with someone who listens, someone who cares, someone who kind, because I think kind is actually as much of a verb as it is a noun. To be kinding, I kind, you kind, she kind, he kind. I think it makes a huge difference because it's that I ask you to step into my space so that you can feel safe, and then herbs have a chance to work because you've begun to open yourself up, because you've opened your heart, because you've taken a leap of faith that there can be a different experience in your world as a result of just having a conversation with another human being.
Beautiful. I want to take you back a little bit because this podcast is called Being Human, Hidden Depths. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's illustrated beautifully how human you are because you understand the kind of basics of human life of kindness and love. But the hidden depths that I have heard conversations that I've had with you, but other people might not know, is that you had a very non-average, eclectic growing up in your life, which probably formulated the person that we see in front of us. And it could have made a person who wasn't giving and kind and loving. It could have made a person that was very insular and introverted and not supportive because you had a very disjointed childhood. So, can you describe for people listening today what that experience was actually like when you had to travel a lot? Because, no fault of yours or your parents, it was down to your dad's job, wasn't it, that you moved a lot?
Okay, so I was made and born in Scotland. I was there long enough to get a birth certificate. My mum was ill. I was the second child born within 17 months, and she had severe postnatal depression. And that in the 60s, that meant that they kept an eye on you, impatient. From that, my dad was sent from Scotland to Portsmouth, so literally one end of Britain to the other end of Britain. And then from there to Nigeria. So by the time I arrived in Nigeria, I was 4.5 or something. I'd lived at home, I'd lived on a ward, I'd lived in quarters, I lived in a house, I lived in a new place. Yeah. And in a different country, having been filled up with vaccines and all sorts of stuff. We came back from there, lived in one place in an RAF base because there was no naval base where my dad was being seconded. Then we moved around the corner and lived there. Then I went from there to a prep school. So this is me at 7, 6.5, 7. Then mum left dad. I went to live with her for a while. Then mum made up with dad, and oh, I hated being at prep school. It was not good for me because it was a boarding school.
Too young.
bottom line is, by the time I hit 40, I'd lived at something like 39 or 40 different postal addresses. That included in and out of my parents a couple of times. By the time I hit 40, my mum died. Well, just after I hit 40, my mum died. That was 2004. And I had, and mum was up and down. She was quite bipolar. A lovely, lovely, lovely woman. I don't get me wrong when I say she was a bit awkward. She was a bit awkward. She was a bit difficult, and that's very close. I was my mum's child. My older brothers went into prep school and went on to public school, and we went right the way through the system, but I couldn't. So I was most of the time at home alone, and it has affected me. But then it's also made me a lot more compassionate and understanding, because large amounts of my work are about being an empath or being intuitive to other people's feelings, or make sense out of things, because it is that plug. It's almost like someone called Carl Gustav Jung, I think it was, talked about the cosmic soup, and some people can plug into it, because nothing is new under the sun, but some people can get some of that community wisdom and see things in a slightly different way. And I think my whole experience of a childhood of lots of change. And although my parents settled, I carried on moving, and I did this, and I did that. Da, 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 da. I think that gave me a greater understanding of how other people are and the needs of other people. So although I've never been deprived, so to speak, I have lived a life that has been very uncertain for various different reasons, and uncertain to myself too. So I've faced the dark night of the soul on more than one occasion. I've had huge amounts of despair that I've been through, and I guess when I'm working with certain people, I know what it feels like. Although I might not have their experiences of life, I do know how it feels to sit on the edge of the black hole of despair. And in some respects, I now recognize myself as being very human, but that makes me more humane in certain ways too. There are other people who've been through huge amounts of stuff, and I think this is what you were alluding to. They've become very bitter and angry and almost brutal towards other people as a result. That's not been my approach. I can't do that. For me, it's always essential to be kind. It is essential to be understanding. Doesn't mean I always am. I don't always find it easy to do, but being there, and I think it's important to have been somewhere that's dark and then shine light into places where people have darkness themselves. So people can say to me quite rightly, "You don't know what I feel like." It's true. I have no idea.
Yeah.
However, I do know what it feels like to be in a very dark place.
So do you think that if you're now looking back and see that your mum was probably bipolar, did you have a concern that you might have gone down that road as well?
Oh, I've been very influenced by it. I because I turned 56 this year, and I'm not saying that as it's a great achievement. It's just it's despite what I've done rather than because of what I've done. It's not through any brilliance of mine. It's just I kept breathing at the time, and here I am.
Last year it nearly wasn't quite the next year, was it? You had two.
Oh, well, I had two major incidences last year, and was the incidenti, if it was Latin, I guess. But yeah, I had a major blackout, which could have caused a heart attack or a stroke, and then I had what people would call fairly minor surgery, but it's the only general anaesthetic I think I've ever had. I had my appendix out. That was a weird experience, but it completely changed me, and I have a great deal more clarity as a result, because not only am I a listener, but I'm a bit of an empath. I can feel things, and I got very good, as many children do, at mimicking and mirroring what my parents were like. And I got very good at adopting my mother's way of managing or not managing, coping or not coping in the world. Yeah, I was prone to being very low. But I began to see things more clearly as a result of going through my own stuff. And I always joke that my appendix being taken out took out my PC gene. It took out my fear of being a little bit more direct in life, because I guess as English we're not encouraged to be quite so direct in the way in which we go about the way in which we live our lives or express ourselves. Now I'm yeah. So yeah, I find that 55 brought me an awful lot. And 56, I guess I'm benefiting from that, because I get more of an overview, or as the Jamaicans, I think it's a Rastafari expression, it's called overstanding. It's like getting in a helicopter, going up and looking down and going, you know what, I can see this differently now. And I think I'm very fortunate for it. So yes, I believe I went through a lot of the dark my mum went through, because I got very good at picking it up. But now I've got very good at putting it down and beginning to see that I have my own issues, but I also have my own brilliance as well.
This is the gift of being an empath. I think when somebody is talking and you are giving them the gift of listening, I think when they understand it, not only can you sympathise, which is very much from my perspective, is they're there, it must be horrible for you. To empathise and go, they're there, I know I've been there, I know how you feel. The empathy, it must be reassuring for them, because they're at last going, someone that knows what I'm feeling, someone that knows what I've been through. And the kind of the burden always is that the problem shared is a problem half, just by somebody listening to what you're going through. And sometimes you don't even know yourself what's breaking your heart or what's messing with your head until you actually get it out there. And then when someone can ask a very simple question, and it's like, oh yeah, he gets me, and he sees what I'm going through, and he knows how to give me that hand to help me out, to pull me out of this hole that I'm sitting in. And it might not be the complete hole, but it'll give me the one step to, he'll help me onto that next step, and the next step, and the next step.
Well, I mean, I can't remember if it was in our conversation before we started talking now, or early on in this particular recording, but you asked me about responses and reactions at the current time. And I began to sort of get a little bit concerned about how I was or wasn't dealing with what's going on. And so I had a conversation with my mentor that I found grounded me a lot. And he said to me, "You're human, you're complicated. So you're going to feel like this, and you're going to feel like that, and it's normal." And I think it's very easy to get stuck on the labels of I'm like this and I'm like that. I'm generally like this, but under other circumstances, I can be completely like that. And then I can go back to being like this again. And I think it's the same with all of it. We're variable. I'm loving, caring, except for when I'm not. I'm nice, except for when I'm not. I'm accepting, except for when I'm not. I'm understanding, except for, guess what? When I'm not. I don't think I'm unusual. And I think it's very easy to get stuck with one set of labels. But I think it's that whole thing of the emotional freedom to go, you know what? I'm a human being. I'm not perfect. Some bits will work better most of the time, and other days they won't. It's what it is.
Absolutely. And this is what kind of gets me with the bigger personalities of this world that are trying to teach you about, this is how you do business, this is how you collaborate, this is how you, and if you listen to any of my videos or talks around collaboration, of like, this might help, give it a go, this is what we do, and it seemed to be quite useful, rather than if you do this and this and this, you're going to have a successful collaboration. It's like, well, no, there is no, it's exactly the same with politicians. Why won't they allow themselves to be vulnerable in a space, rather than go, I'm right, you're wrong, go, well, we think this will help, we're trying it out, we're not too sure, that this seems to be the best choice of action at the moment. It's like, well, fair enough, go on then, go give it, let's make sure we all stay at home then, we'll give it a shot. But they're like, this is the only way we can hit the bell curve. Well, people don't like being told what to do, so let's say, right, we're all in this together. And I think possibly Boris has got the right attitude around it. It's like, we're all in this together, let's try. We're doing it for the health service. All these people are out there battling for us. What can we do for them? Well, let's stay indoors and stop having to give them too much pressure. So the logic goes, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Rather than this is what you have to do. We're going to get the military out there and we're going to make sure you stay in your houses and you're going to be in prison. And, you know, self-isolation is your prison. It's that kind of all or nothing mentality. We're right, you're wrong. It's like the Matilda film. Did you remember watching that with the headmistress, Miss Trunchbull, and obviously Matilda's dad? And it's all about I'm right, you're wrong.
The Hard Knock Life.
No, that's Annie. But
Annie. Okay, sorry. So, the story sounds very familiar. I'm thinking, okay.
Yeah, watch the film. If you haven't recently, watch it again. Or if you can watch the stage show, it's amazing. But
I only know Annie. I don't know Matilda very well, unfortunately. Sorry.
Go back to your old doll and have a read in there. But the point I'm trying to make is that our world is conceived of right and wrong, and in reality, that doesn't even exist.
There's a huge amount of grey.
Yes.
You will be you. I can have one opinion, I can have two opinions, I can have three opinions, I can have four opinions, I can have 5 opinions of you, but you are you. And that's the whole thing. And I think we do that with society. We go, oh, society is all wrong, we've got to fix it. Well, society is a collaboration of thought processes, as are any organizations and or communities or groups of individuals. But we make it into, as we say, black and white, and nothing is black and white. And when you look at law, if you look at the arguments that happen within a court, yes, there is the law, which is black and white, but the nuances, the understanding, the clarity or the not clarity, the position of a punctuation or a comma, they're all very, very clear. And actually, proper legal documents haven't got any punctuation in them at all. They might do. A sentence ends and then you get a capital letter that tells you it's the beginning of the next sentence. That's it, just to avoid that sort of thing. And it's bizarre, but then I think it's the human need to have a set of structure, because we need to have an understanding. You know, it's like my beliefs mean that I conceive things in a particular way. Now, my beliefs are built on all sorts of different topics, and sometimes they're useful and sometimes they're absolute tosh. But I believe them to be true on some level. And in some ways, I might be right for a period of time until I realize that they're either not right or not helpful.
Yeah.
And in the collaboration, what I like about what goes on is it's possible, by agreeing that I wish to work alongside and with someone, I can suspend some of my belief processes and go, I love you and the process enough that I'm prepared to consider doing something differently. And I've got most of what I get out of Collaboration Global because I enjoy watching how feisty you are in your beliefs to make something possible, regardless of how weird other people are around you. You've still got this large overview that it can be something whereby we can rub along together, much like, I suppose, stones tumbling in a tumbler that polishes them and knocks the edges off them, and the sand makes them from rough to smooth. It's like your greater belief process, regardless of what happens, is that can happen. That can be possible. That potential is there. That's what I see. So my collaboration with Collaboration Global is built on, I see you believe in your dream. You have the passion in your dream. You hold up the torch in the darkness for your dream, and you will fight tooth and nail nicely for your dream to make it happen. And so my bit is just to go, here's my finger. I'm involved.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I'm passionate about is to help people get that passion for themselves, for their dream. And if their dream is big for them, well, then let's see if there's anyone else around. Let's join up and see if we can make your dream come true together. And then other people will help those people with their dreams come true. And some people come to the space and they don't know what their dream is, but they know they probably have one somewhere. And when they find out what it is, well, will you help me find out what it is? Okay, we'll help you find out what your dream is, and then let's find the right people to help you make it come true. Everyone is on the planet for a reason.
Yeah.
And you've kind of discovered your reason so far, and tomorrow it could change. But for now, it's about kindness, it's about love, it's about helping people, and you do that in a variety of ways. And I think that if we take out the reasons why we are against each other, so that there is no reason to have the angst, there is just a reason to have the love, then we can move forward. And that's what my game is taking all those bits out. So when people go, yes, but I'm right and he's wrong, there is no right or wrong. There's a solution. Go find a solution. That is how you can collaborate, because you're working towards a solution, not keeping the ego intact because I'm right, I know I'm right. There is no right and wrong. So make it easy on yourself and take that away. Otherwise, you're just going to be exhausted and be old, lonely, and right. And that doesn't serve anyone. So
right, inverted commas.
Exactly.
Do you notice that there's a real correlation in the way in which we conceive and we perceive things? That's probably, I suspect, apart from being very loving and caring as individuals, it's because we have a very similar approach to it all. We just have very slightly different focuses as to what that particular approach is about. Because for me, I have a passion about our communities working well. You have a real passion about how our communities can work together. I have a passion about collaboration and connection, engagement, empowerment with individuals on a one-to-many basis. You have a real passion about doing that as a community. So we actually have a great deal of common ground. That's probably why I guess we have that mutual appreciation between ourselves. It's about love, and it's about empowering people to feel their own power and engagement again. I've not thought about it. It's only because we're talking about it now. It's just like, oh, similar language, similar intention here.
Yes, and I think that's why we were magnetized together. I think you attract the sort of people that are also believing what you're believing, and it doesn't mean that you've got a tight little club because you're all West Ham supporters or whatever football team. It just means
that sounds like your husband's just got a mention there, but okay.
It's about magnetizing, being attracted together because of the mission. And from my point of view, I believe we've all been gifted a mission. We've all been gifted a destiny. We've been gifted a genius in order to fulfill that destiny. So when you come across somebody else who also has either a similar genius or a similar destiny or on a similar mission, you need to be together. You need to hang out together. You need to know about each other and like and trust each other, so that you can amplify what your mission is and what your destiny is. And then the geniuses invariably complement each other in order for that to be magnified. And then you can make a difference. And sometimes that means you make some money together, called, a business collaboration. And sometimes it's just about creating more content so that more and more people can find out what you're about, and what your mission is in life. And one thing we haven't mentioned yet, obviously we've talked about you being a herbalist, professional listener. I love that little phrase, I've written it down. Is obviously as being a celebrant. So not only do you provide support and help and alternative ways of helping people to be and stay healthy through herbalism, but also at the other end of the spectrum, when people are in grief and bereavement, you are there to support them as well. So do you want to just share briefly how that came about? Because it's not the sort of thing that you go to a careers officer at 16 and they say, what do you want to be? And you go, oh, I want to be a celebrant. It's probably wasn't on the top of your list at that time. How did that come about?
There's nothing on the top of my list when I was 16. Late bloomer, that's what I'm saying. I tell you, it's really interesting. I have a very, very long history of seeking to understand things in life, different types of spirituality in different times. Excuse me. In 2004, I knew my mum was going to be approaching her end of life. She'd been ill for many years, and I was there during her last hours. And although I wasn't in the room when she stopped breathing, I was in the room a second after, literally. And first thing I did with my medical background, I checked her carotid pulse and felt the last two little flutters, and then there was total silence. And my mum had had a death battle for 24 hours by then, if not longer. And I helped lay out her body, having closed her eyes. And it's not like the movies. They wave a hand in front and the eyes are closed. You know, it's like one eye wouldn't close. And that sort of set me up to being a lot more aware of death and the experience of death, because I was in shock. It's the first time I'd lost a parent. It was a very odd experience. And then we had to prepare for her funeral, and we had to do this, we had to do that, talk to Dad, make sure he was all right. And in 2014, so 10 years later, a friend of mine is an interfaith minister. You know what, Ben? Why don't you look at doing funerals? You know, you'd make a very good celebrant. You know, the way in which your demeanour, your background, your understanding, your experience. It freaked the hell out of me, and I thought, so that was literally 10 years to the day from my mum's death, and around the October, November, I started looking at courses, and I went off to visit a couple of crematoriums to see what happens and what it was like. And then I took training. I started doing a 6-month course, planning to do it in 3 months. I took 2 years, 2.5, because I got really sort of imposter syndrome. But what a lot of people don't understand is a funeral celebrant's job. I don't do any other form of celebrancy. I don't bury people. I don't name people. I don't do other services. I only do funeral services. And people seem to think that it's a morbid job. It's not. It's about the celebration of life. It's about caring for individuals who are bereaved. It's for looking after folk. I mean, I trained before celebrancy. I trained with Cruise Bereavement Care, and I ran a branch for a short period of time. And at that time, I thought it was all about death. But recently, I've realised that my job actually is the excuse or the reason for doing the job is death has happened. But the reason for doing the job is to focus on life. Is to focus on the life of the person who has passed, who has died, who is no longer here, depending which way you like to frame it. It is about celebrating their life, telling their story, embodying that person in the chapel before saying the final goodbyes, and holding the space in which people can be sad because they knew that person, they missed them. But it's about them being able to have their goodbyes. So it's about the living. And this is the thing that's very strange. So I build intimate relationships with families very quickly. I write down information. I craft a script. I check the script. I speak the script, but I also embody and perform it for service. So I did at 9 o'clock this morning. Somebody who had COVID at the end, as many people who have been ill with other illnesses. He was very ill elsewhere, and COVID was just the last straw, which is what's happening with many people. It's quite often a last straw disease, or it seems to be. And I got to celebrate this man. I got to provide closure and goodbyes for the 9 people who could attend the chapel and spread out. They got to say their goodbyes. They got to kiss the coffin, put the head on the coffin, and pull their eyes out during the closing piece of music, because it was a 5-minute piece of music, so it gave ample time for them to say what they needed to say. But it was it was about their needs as people who were alive
Mm.
and looking after them with love and with care. I always say that there are three things that are really important for a funeral service: love, beauty, and strangely humor.
I was going to say laughter. Yeah, definitely.
A lot of people think humor might be a bit inappropriate, but if you think about how many parts of life we get through with humor,
Mm.
I find even having faced the death, most people are open to a little bit of a laugh or a joke, a little chuckle, a smile, because it's important. And my primary person for this service was the wife, the second wife. Well, yeah, yeah, the wife. It's complicated. The wife, and she knew a couple of lines, and she chuckled a couple of times. She knew what was coming. But there was levity amongst the sadness. There, amongst the pathos, you can still smile, you can still acknowledge oddities, And these times can be very, very special and very, very beautiful. So, although it's not my healing in my usual way of listening and prescribing potentially, but it is in listening, it is in caring that I'm able to encourage people to heal through the process of saying goodbye, heal through the process of their grief, heal through the beauty of what is there and possible because of the person that they have lost and the experience they're having. It is also possible I'm deluding myself, but I have witnessed enough people at the end of a service. I didn't get it today because of circumstance,
Mm.
but I'm in the chapel with 9 today. The last time I did a service in there, I had 130, 140 people.
Mm.
Lots of hugs. I went back to the wake. Lots of feedback, lots of love, lots of response, because this was pre-corona. And we had the opportunity to be in each other's spaces and appreciate each other. But it is powerful, and it is possible to heal at these times because of the care. The training I've had is amazing, and the type of people I work with really do engage and look after their families very well.
I think that is one of the things that is tragic about the deaths at the moment, is because people die alone because of the circumstances. Yes. That's the hard part. So to be able to, at some point, provide a memorial service when we are allowed to get together, I would imagine, I hope people will still do that, even though it feels like, oh, it was 6 months ago when they died. Well, still do it, because it is that celebration, isn't it? That celebration of life. Yeah. It gives you a feeling of completeness, I think, when you can go through that. Having been to many, 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 many funerals, sadly, it does give you a kind of a line in the sand, that you feel like there's this completeness, and that they can move on, and so can you. Gone but not forgotten, as the saying goes.
There is a reason why we have ceremony.
Mm.
If it actually were to strip life back, very large parts of life are about ritual. How we make a cup of tea, when we have the cup of tea, how we make our porridge, how we make our toast. It's not about shoving it in a toaster. It's about the active choice of the type of bread we're going to have, the thickness of the bread, how we're going to do it, how long we do it for, how we then prepare it at the end. Ceremony is about taking rituals that we have, slightly formalizing them, and making it possible to achieve something else with it. So when it comes to a celebration or a goodbye or whatever, yes, we seem to think that the only final thing is the actual funeral service itself. No, not at all. I did a service for a family. They booked me privately because I knew them outside of the profession. And it was the wife and children, the grandchildren from the first marriage of the deceased. And he was in Ireland when he died, his second wife. The second wife and her family had the full service in Ireland and had him cremated. Yeah, it'd be slightly more difficult. They'd had him buried, I guess, but had him cremated. You do need humour in this job. And they sent the ashes back to the UK, and we had a memorial service that was like a second funeral, except that the number one grandson carried him in to the chapel. He had his own wooden box. He took up pride of place on the catafalque, as a coffin would normally do if you have a body, and I ran a funeral service. But it gave them closure. Now, we can do that with a memorial service. Under the situation where you've got too many too many deaths at the same time, funerals will get stopped, and they'll have what are called direct cremations, where you don't actually get a funeral at all. But you can still do a funeral or a memorial service, because you can still remember the person. The person can be present as ashes instead of a full body in a coffin. So we have choice, we have option, we have possibility, like everywhere else in life, how and what we want to make of it. So if someone is lost at sea, or God forbid at the time of the tsunami, where you don't have any evidence of the individual, you've got to do a set of ceremony for them. And it is possible to do that when it's well managed, well held, and is done in a way that is understanding and considered for the people who were there. Because that's what it's always about, the people who were there to memory.
It stays with you. It stays with you. What happens on that day will stay with you forever.
Yes. And there are people who do services badly, unfortunately, and people do get bad experiences. And I think it's totally inappropriate. That's the English understatement version. I think it's appalling and a great travesty that things are missed and or go wrong, and it's unnecessary.
Well, listen, thank you, Ben. I'm having to draw it to a close. I've just spotted that we could talk for another hour, you and I, as we have done in the past. So thank you so much for being part of our Being Human Hidden Depths podcast. It's given us all food for thought, that's for sure, whether it be around COVID-19, whether it be around being love, being kindness as a verb and a noun. And it's really interesting to see that you label yourself as a professional listener. I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think that's something that in this day and age, we could all do with a lot more of. So thank you very much for joining me today. How could people contact you if they want to get hold of you, either as a herbalist, as a celebrant, or just somebody to have a little chat with? What's the easiest way for them to get hold of you?
Can I have a last snippet? Am I allowed a last soundbite before I say that bit?
Snippet
away. All right, it's the cheeky request. So for me, one thing I always say to people is that you don't just listen with your ears. You listen with your eyes, you listen with your heart, you listen with almost your entire nervous system and with your intuition, as well as what you can sense in what's being said. I think they're all very distinct parts of the ability to pay attention, you know. And people say, oh yeah, you've got to have the right body language, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. No, you've got to have the right intention, and then use the other skill sets that are there and possible to deal with or use or utilize for that engagement with another human being. So that's just quick climb off my soapbox. No, getting hold of me.
Yes.
I have a unique name.
Top tip, if you're listening to somebody, put your mobile phone down. That usually helps.
Yeah. Well, it's part of the intention, isn't it? I can break most of the rules of communication and still have people know that I'm paying attention. So this is important. So getting hold of me, I have a unique name. So my name is Benn Abdy Collins, BENN ABDY Collins, COLLINS. So BENN ABDY Collins. Put a .com on the end, you'll find me and everything else you need to know.
Nice and simple. Thank you so much for joining me today, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure, and look forward to seeing you, if not in real life, at a meeting for Collaboration Global very soon. If you want to find out any more about Collaboration Global, then please look for www.collaborationglobal.org, or you can get hold of me, Jill, at collaborationglobal.org on email as well. See you next time. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, Jill. Take care.